Hi, and welcome to this brief introduction to MuseumIndex Plus, the collection management system from System Simulation. So what we're looking at here is the home screen. This is what you see when you first log into the database. We can see here who we're logged in as, which view we're currently using. I'll come on to views in a minute. And also a list of procedures and catalog records that I've been working on recently. I haven't done any at the moment, but those provide you with quick ways of getting back to records you've been working on recently. We have a toolbar, access to some common features, just getting back to this home screen, running advanced searches, creating new records, and dealing with procedures. Up here we have some searching facilities, so there's a Google-style free text search across all the fields within the database, as well as a drop-down which shows me searches that I've performed recently, and I can just rerun those searches by clicking on these entries. And these are navigation buttons that let me go backwards and forwards, much like you would in a web browser. And we'll see that in a minute. We have a fairly standard menu across the top, reporting, copy and paste facilities, searching capabilities, fetching linked records, creating, editing, deleting records, different views that we've got built of our database, which I'll show you in a second, and more advanced procedures and facilities. There's a panel that you can open up on the left here called the Context panel, which shows you an overview of your database. These are the objects by their various departments with counts of how many records in each department, and an overview of the procedures that we've got in the database. I'm just going to close that for the moment. On the right here we then have this set of buttons which gives us our main functions within MuseumIndex Plus. We can return to the record that we were looking at when we last used the system, which I'll do in a second. We can run an advanced search for objects or parts of objects, which I'll cover in more detail in a separate video on searching. We can create brand new object records, which again I'll cover in a separate video. And we can deal with procedures, searching for either existing procedures. That means things like loans or acquisitions, object entry, or starting a brand new procedure. And again, a separate video to cover these separate features. For now, all I'm going to do is click here to go back to the record I was looking at last, and just talk you around this screen a little bit. So this is the main data display screen. This was a result of a search. You can see in the title bar up here, this is a result of an organizer set, which is a predefined set of interesting records that I've selected. Down here I have the summary of the 4 records in that set, which I can navigate across just by stepping on the entries here. I can see the summary in different forms. So here we have a catalogue listing of department, museum number. In this case there's multiple parts, so this has multiple museum numbers. The object name, the brief description, and the location. We can look at the summary in different formats, so we can see it as a grid of thumbnails with the museum number, and brief description as a hover text. We can see it as a set of tiny thumbnails to maximize screen space when you're doing a very visually oriented search. And the hover text there is basically the larger thumbnail with the museum number. We have a combined summary where we've got a mixture of thumbnails and brief and cataloging data. And then this 5th tab here is reserved for custom summaries that you can build yourselves. In the top half of the screen we have the currently selected record. Let's just go back to the globe clock. So on the left here we have the metadata for the record, and on the right here we have the images and associated information to do with digital assets annotations and link procedures. All three of these panels can be resized depending on what you're doing or how you prefer to have your screen laid out, so we can give more space to the record, maybe a bit more space to the images. And the system remembers all of these settings, and you can, with a single click on these, you can return to the default positions. The data itself, the metadata about the record, is shown in this panel on the left here, which we can scroll up and down. The information is divided across a number of sections. This is because within the Spectrum standard there are many hundreds of fields that you can use theoretically to catalogue your object. And so one of the strengths of MuseumIndex Plus is giving you ways to manage that breadth of information and still make the system usable. So the first thing we do is we divide the fields into various sections. You can customize these section headings. So within identification and production, we've got things like the basic object number, its name, brief description, and information about the production of the object, where it was made, when it was made, and who made it. And then in the description and dimensions section, things like physical description, the materials and techniques used in the manufacture of the object, a note on the dimensions, information about inscriptions, and so on, historical information, information about interpretation and approvals, curators' comments, exhibition labels, these kind of things, information about the condition of the object. And all of this arrangement of data, the headings and the fields within those headings, we call a view. So MuseumIndex Plus ships with a small number of views. We have a default view. We've got the full spectrum view, which, if I just collapse all these sections again, you can see has a lot more sections. There are a lot of fields in Spectrum that many people don't use a lot of the time, and so for day-to-day purposes, this view often has more information than most people need to see, hence the default view. And then in this case, I should have said at the beginning, but the data that we're using here is from the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's a training database which they allow us to use for demonstration purposes. So what the V&A have done is they've built another view called the minimum standard view. They have a minimum cataloging standard, a set of fields that they would like most objects to have filled in at the very least, and so they've built a view that just contains those fields. We actually have two tabs over here. We have the cataloging information. We also have an inventory tab that shows the basic inventory of the object. In this particular case, this object is in multiple parts. So you can see here it's actually in 11 parts. Each part has its own museum number, and when I hover over that museum number, I get to see the responsible department, museum number, object name, part description, and part location. So the parts of the objects might have different names, different numbers, and theoretically be in different places. You might send a damaged part of an object to conservation, but not the rest of the object, for example. On the right-hand side over here, we have the images of the object. So every object can have multiple images associated with it. Here we've got various views of the whole globe clock, as well as a couple of images of the movement within inside the clock. Any one of these images you can zoom in, so you can drag out a rectangle to zoom in and out of the image. You can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. When you're zoomed in, you can drag and drop the image around to pan it. You can also open the image up full screen, and again zoom within there. Or you can open the image up in a separate window. which remains on your desktop separate to MuseumIndex Plus, and that can be useful for keeping images around if you're trying to compare multiple images and decide which one to use. As well as the images associated with an object, in theory we might have other digital assets associated. We haven't got any in this case, but those would include video files, sound files, maybe 3D VRML models of the object. We have annotations, so any bit of information on the left here from the Spectrum standard and other fields beyond that can be annotated. So in this instance, we've added a note against the dimensions. If I scroll down to the dimensions, you might be able to see that. I think maybe it's been on one of the parts. I won't hunt around finding that, but we've added an annotation to one of the dimensions saying that it needs remeasuring. This tab basically brings all those annotations together in one place. They often make more sense in context over here. And then the final tab is the journal, which is a date-ordered list of all the procedures that this object has been involved in. Procedures covers a broad range of things, so from Spectrum we have the use of collections procedure, which is used to describe exhibitions. So in this case this object has appeared in 2 exhibitions, a test exhibition that I've created for demonstration purposes and an exhibition in 2000 in the Jones galleries. We can, anything in blue like these links here, we can click on and they'll take us to other records. So if I wanted to look at the information about this exhibition here, I can just click on that and that takes me to a different record, which is a record of the exhibition. Again, we have information divided up into these section headings. So all procedures have a sort of start and end date, theoretically, and then this particular type of procedure, an use of collections procedure, has information about the exhibition. When I'm looking at the exhibition, I have a tab over here which shows me the items that appeared in that exhibition, and if I click on that, that actually takes me back to the clock that I was looking at, because that was the item in that exhibition. I can go back to the procedure and again back to my search result of 4 records. I guess just a couple of other things to show you on this screen. When we're stepping across records, if I was particularly interested, say, in the materials of the object, I can scroll down to see those. If I step onto the next record, the photograph, I'm back at the top and I can scroll down again to see the materials for that object. Scroll down again to see the materials for that object. That's obviously a bit of a pain, so to avoid scrolling, what you can do is, if you're particularly interested in one field, let's say materials, then I can click on that to anchor that field to the top here. And now when I step onto a different record, if I go back to the globe clock, you can see here it's already scrolled down to that material field for me if I step onto this record. So it's effectively anchored the material field to the top there. I can still scroll up. Let's just go to the last record. And I can clear that anchor again just by clicking on it. And then the next time I go to a record, I'm back at the top again. Other things I can do with views, you've seen me expanding and collapsing these sections, and the system remembers which sections you have open and closed. You can also, we can use this section chooser here to temporarily hide sections altogether. So if I really just want to have the basic identification and production information, I could hide all the other sections. And now you see on the left here, that's all I have is just that one section heading. Let's just bring this back again, restore all those. The other thing I can do is reorder them. So if I'm really more interested in condition than anything else, I can bring that section to the top. And then as I look at the object, if I've got any condition information, then that will appear first. And I can restore the default order. More excitingly with these views, as well as picking the views that are built in and sort of rearranging the views, the sections in the views that I have, there's what we call the View Manager, which you can use to build your own brand new views. So on the left here I have the existing views. That's full spectrum view, the minimum standard view. Let's go with full spectrum. And on the right here I have my own views. So what I can do is I can right click here and create a new view. Let's just call this my view. Views can be used for all sorts of things. You can have views for different roles, you know, conservator's view, a volunteer's view, but also views for tasks. If you're just doing a job today or this week that involves a particular set of fields that you need easy access to, then you just build a view with those fields in it. So what I'm going to do here, I'll have the entire identification section, so I'll just drag that across. Maybe I'm not really interested in distinguishing features or comments, so I'll just get rid of those by dragging them back over to the left. And then I'll have a new section of my own called Details. And in my Details section, I'm going to have, let's have the dimensions, the materials, I'll have the object production date, so when the object was made, who made it, and where it was made. That'll do. So now I'm looking at a new view, looking at my view of the object with just the fields that I've picked. And again, as I step over the different records, I'm just seeing those fields, the fields that I've chosen to see. I think lastly, just a couple of other things you can do in the data panel here. We have free text fields, obviously, no limit on the amount of text that you can put in these. As well as that, we have certain fields controlled, for example, by a thesaurus. So the materials field here, this object's made of 3 different materials. Each one of those is linked into a thesaurus, so I can right click on steel and pick locate. And this window pops up to show me where steel sits in my materials thesaurus. In this case, the V&A are using the Art and Architecture thesaurus from Getty, but you can build your own, or there are a number of others available. Let's just have a look at one more. Let's have a look at copper alloy and see where that sits within the thesaurus. Some fields, like for example the object production person, are tied into a separate authority record with more information. In this case, so for example the maker of this object, Johann Reinhold, I can right click here and bring up the authority record for this person. Let's just resize that slightly to fit it on the screen. So that takes me to a separate authority record about this person with information, biographical information. So I think that concludes an overview of the basic screens within MuseumIndex Plus. The next video in this series will be about searching within MuseumIndex Plus. Thank you.